Hi everyone! If you want to know how to make a top like this with these beautiful bell sleeves, this is the video for you. If you're new here, my name is Eli and I run my own small business, Crochet Made by Eli, where I sell wearables, plushies, and patterns over on my Etsy. So if you're interested in purchasing anything that you see in this video or others, make sure you check that out. In today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys a full tutorial on how to make my favorite shrug, which comes with these beautiful big bell sleeves. I have made 3 versions of this top so far. The first version, which I'll be showing in this video, is the shrug version, where it is just the top part here and then these big beautiful sleeves. The second version is this one, where it's a little bit longer in the front and it covers a bit of the chest, but it's still very much a crop top. And the third version is this one, where it has a full front and back panel and is an actual shirt, but still a very pretty mesh stitch. So today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make the shrug, also called a bolero or just sleeves, whatever you want to call it. The shrug version is just the top part. It connects underneath the armpits and has nothing covering the front, so it's mostly just a pair of sleeves. If you're interested in seeing how to make the full shirt version, I do have a video out on that already. It is not a full tutorial, but it's a vlog more showing the process of going through each part of it. So if you're more of an intermediate crocheter, that video would be good for you. But if you're a full beginner, this is the video for you. To make this top, the only crochet knowledge you're going to need is how to chain and how to make a double crochet. If you don't know how to do those and you're brand new to crocheting, don't worry, I do have a different video that would work great for you. It's crocheting for beginners, so feel free to check that video out first and then come back once you're ready. So let's get into the tutorial. So the materials that you'll need to make this is very simple. You will need a crochet hook, of course. I'll be using a 5mm, which works great with my tension. If you do have a tighter tension though, you may want to size up to a 6 or 6.5mm. The mesh stitch that we'll be doing works best when it's done loosely. So if you have a tight tension, definitely size up to a 6 or a 6.5. I have a very loose tension, so a 5 works good for me. You will also need a pair of scissors and a darning needle, of course, and then you'll need some yarn. I'll be using the Loops and Threads Color Craft Acrylic in their big jumbo skein, which is 450 grams. I will not be using all of this skein, but I will be using at least half of it. I'm expecting to use about 250 to 300 grams. The amount of yarn that you'll need will definitely depend on the size that you're doing, if you're doing a front panel or if you're just doing a small shrug. So I'll be doing this to fit me, which is around a size large to extra large. If you're making a smaller version, you'll definitely need less yarn, maybe only about 200 grams. If you're using the Loops and Threads, I suggest getting 2 skeins of the Loops and Threads Soft Classic Acrylic, because that is cheaper than getting one of the jumbo skeins. But I'll be using what I have on hand. So the first row of our piece is going to be made by doing a foundation double crochet. If you don't know how to do that, don't worry, I am going to show you how to do this, but if you prefer not to do it, you can always chain and do double crochets back. We're going to start by making a slip knot, and then we are going to chain 2. Once you have your chain 2, we're going to start making our foundation double crochet. We'll do this by yarning over, and then we're going to insert into the first chain there. So I'm going to go into the bump there. So you can see I've picked up the bump on my hook. The chain is on the back of it. So again, I'm going into the back bump of that first chain. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull through. And you can see we now have 3 loops on our hook. Now we're going to yarn over and pull through just 1 loop. This is going to create the bottom of our double crochet. Now we still have 3 loops on our hook. We're going to yarn over and pull through 2, leaving us with 2 loops on our hook. Yarn over and pull through 2 again. And that is how we make our first double crochet. It definitely looks a little weird here, but as we continue it, it'll make more sense. You can see we have a bit of a chain on the bottom and on the top. To continue the foundation double crochet, we're going to yarn over, and then we're going to insert into the bottom of this stitch. So turning it over, you can see the 2 loops there, which kind of makes a V shape. We're going to be inserting our hook into that V. So you can see both are on top of my hook there. So again, we're going into that V. Then we're going to continue the same double crochet. So we're going to yarn over and pull through. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through 1 to make the bottom, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and that makes the top. So you can see it a little bit clearer now. We have 2 stitches on the bottom, 2 stitches on the top, and the first part is just a little bit chunky because of our chains. So we're going to be working up vertically instead of horizontally like we normally would. So we're going to continue this, yarn over, insert into that bottom stitch, yarn over and pull through, yarn over and pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and that is our 3rd double crochet. Now this row is going to be used to make the length of our shrug from shoulder to shoulder. So if you're doing this shrug like I am, where it's only going to be connecting under the armpits, we need this to reach from shoulder to shoulder. If you're going to be doing it longer where it needs to cover your chest, you'll want to make sure this is wide enough to cover your bust in case that measurement is bigger than your shoulder to shoulder measurement. So we're going to continue building this up until it's long enough. And the good part of doing this technique for the double crochets is we can easily make it longer and easily make it shorter without having to take away the entire row and redo any chains. So if you found that yours was too long, you can just pull it to take it apart. And that easily takes out a stitch, and you can easily add more on. So I'm going to continue working on my foundation double crochets until this is wide enough for me. I found for me the perfect number is 55 stitches, so I'm going to do that and then meet you guys back here. Alright, so this is my first row, which has 55 stitches. I just wanted to show a different angle so you guys can see clearly what I'm measuring. But this fits shoulder to shoulder, so it's kind of the side or top to the same spot on the other side, and this also comfortably fits from armpit to armpit. Now you want to make sure you're not stretching this row too much when you take that measurement, because the rows after are not going to be as stretchy as this. The mesh tends to be a little bit less stretchy than the double crochet rows, so it needs to comfortably fit this measurement. And again, if you're making it longer and it's going across your bust, you may need to add a few more stitches than you think, but it's really easy to make this row shorter or longer. So once you've reached your desired length, your row should be looking like this, and you want to make sure your double crochets are not shorter or pulling on one side more than the other. It should be fairly even, where the tension is even all over. If you're finding that one side is squishing down more than the other, it may be that your stitches are looser or tighter in one section. I find sometimes it's easy to make that first stitch too tight, like this part. If you do that too tight, it's going to start pulling. So you want to make sure that that first stitch is nice and loose, so you pull it up a bit before you yarn over and pull through. So if your row is not looking how you want it to look, you may need to practice that stitch a little bit before moving on. Mine is how I want it to look, so we're going to move on to row 2, which is starting our mesh stitch. So making this mesh stitch is super easy. All we're doing is double crochets and chaining. Each row is going to need to start and end on a double crochet so that we have that border. Some people like to start a double crochet round by chaining 2, but I prefer to do a standing double crochet. To do a standing double crochet, we're going to insert our hook into our stitch. So into our stitch like normal, where you can see both loops of the stitch are on my hook. We're going to yarn over and pull through, pulling up a loop. So I have 2 loops here, and you do want to make sure these are pulled up to the same height, and not like this where one is shorter or one is way looser. You want to make sure they're even. We're going to yarn over and pull through 2, just like a regular single crochet. Then we're going to go back into the single crochet. So I'm going in the front of it there. So I'm picking up just the 1 loop. So inserting just into the front of the stitch there, we're going to yarn over and pull through a loop. Now we have 2, and we're going to yarn over and finish it, and that makes our double crochet. You can use this to make a triple crochet as well by just continuing another stitch on top of that. So I prefer to do that to start my rows on a double crochet. Then we're going to chain 2. And you want to make sure these chains are not tight. It's very important that these stitches are done loosely. Then we're going to skip 2 spaces and we're going to do a double crochet in the 3rd space. So putting a double crochet there, and that makes our first mesh block or our first mesh stitch. So you can see double crochet, chain 2 and skip 2, double crochet. And we're going to continue this for the entire row. So we're going to chain 2, skip 2, double crochet, chain 2, skip 2, double crochet. And again, very important to make sure that your tension is loose for this part. If you're finding that your chains are too tight and pulling in, definitely size up your hook, and it's better to notice this now than too late into your project. So we're going to continue this for the rest of our row. All right, so finishing round 2, this is what your piece should be looking like. You should have been able to end on a double crochet here with 2 spaces in between each. If you did not have enough stitches to end on a double crochet, you should go back and check to make sure you did skip 2 every time and didn't accidentally skip 1 or 3. If you've confirmed that you skipped 2 every one and still don't have enough to put your double crochet at the end, you might not have put enough base stitches. So again, this first row should be a multiple of 3 plus 1 because each mesh section is 3 stitches plus 1 to end the row. So if your second row is looking good, we'll move on to row 3. To make row 3, we're going to be flipping our work again, and we're going to continue with this mesh stitch. So we're going to start our row by placing a double crochet in the first one, and we're going to do a standing double crochet again. So we'll do this by placing a single crochet first, and then inserting back into that one and placing another one on top. Then we're going to continue the mesh stitch. We're going to chain 2 and place a double crochet, and each double crochet is going to go on top of the one from the previous row. So the mesh stitches will line up like this, where the spaces are in line and the double crochets are in line. So we're just going to continue with this pattern, chain 2, skip 2, double crochet. Super simple, and it works up super quick. So I'm going to continue with these stitches and meet you back after row 3. All right, this is what we're looking like after row 3. We've got our 2 rows of mesh, and what we're going to do is add on a 3rd row of the mesh. So we're just going to flip our work and repeat the row that we just did, starting with our standing double crochet, chain 2, skip 2, double crochet. So we're just going to repeat this to the end of the row to make our 3rd mesh row. So here we are after row 4 with our 3 rows of mesh. Our next row is going to be a row of just solid double crochet to start creating that double crochet and mesh pattern. We're going to start by flipping our work again. And we're going to be starting with a double crochet as usual, placing our standing double crochet in the first stitch. And then we're going to be placing 2 double crochet in each space here, and then a double crochet on top of each one. And that way we're going to continue having the exact same amount of stitches, but have a solid row. So when you're placing the double crochets in the space, you don't need to go into the actual chains, you can just work below them into the space. If you want to go into the chains, you can, but I find it doesn't change the look much, but it takes a lot longer. So we're just going to place our first double crochet in the space. And as you can see, I'm going underneath the chain. And that's our 2 double crochet. Then we'll place one on top of that double crochet. And we're going to do this for the entire row. So 2 double crochet in each space. And then a double crochet on top of each one from the previous row. So as you can see while we're doing this, it's going to make a nice solid row. If you find that your 2 double crochet are joining in the middle a bit and there's weird spaces, you can always space them out a little bit more so that it's even. But I find even if they do join a little bit and move towards the center, it doesn't change the look of it and it's really not noticeable overall, so I tend to just leave mine. So we're just going to continue this row with all double crochets. Once you get to the end of the row, you will want to count these stitches and make sure you still have the same amount and that you didn't accidentally do 1 or 3 in a space. You should be able to keep the exact same number of stitches in each row. So here we are after I've finished row 5 and we've completed our first repeat. This is the pattern that we're going to be doing for the entire piece. 1 row of double crochet, 3 rows of mesh, 1 double, 3 mesh, and that's it. At this point, once you finish these 5 rows, you will want to check and make sure this is still fitting how you want it to do, because this is how the tension is going to be for the rest of your piece. So if you find that this is wider than you thought it was going to be or shorter than you thought it would be, you can go back and adjust your stitches now. But you want to make sure that you are checking this now and not waiting too far into the piece to check that this does fit you. So to make the front panel of this, I find the perfect length for me is 3 of these sections, which is a total of 13 rows because each repeat has 4 and we have our starting row. Our piece is always going to start and end on these solid double crochet rows. So just checking to make sure that this does fit me properly. It comfortably fits from armpit to armpit or shoulder to shoulder because that's where this is going to be sitting. So I like mine to be 3 sections like I mentioned. So the top is going to sit about there, and then we'll have 2 sections longer. And the front and back panels do need to be wide enough that it will reach around your arms. So we're going to create this front panel, we'll make a neck hole, and then we're going to make a back panel and connect it under the armpits. So if this is too short, it's not going to be wide enough to actually fit around your arms, because the length of the front and back is going to create those armholes. So I'm going to repeat this 2 more times and I'll meet you back after I've finished off the length of my front panel. And again, that's going to be a total of 13 rows for me. If you want yours shorter, if you have smaller arms and it doesn't need to be as long, you can do just 2 repeats. If you want it to be a bit longer or you have bigger arms, you might want to do 4 or 5 depending on your tension and how big your rows are. Alrighty, here's what my front panel is looking like after I did my 3 repeats, and you can see that we're starting and ending on a solid double crochet row. We are now going to move on to making the neckline. Making the neckline is super simple. All we're going to be doing is placing a few double crochet on one side, chaining across, and then double crocheted on the other side. I like to have a really wide neckline for mine where it's basically no neckline and it's just sitting on my shoulders. So I'm going to be placing 6 double crochet, chaining across the middle, and 6 double crochet. Now you're going to need to make sure that the amount of chains you have in between matches the amount of stitches you have here. So I ended up doing a total of 52 stitches across. I had originally wanted to do 55, but it was 1 section too big, so I'm doing 52. So I'm going to do 52 minus 12 because that's the stitches for both sides, and that leaves me with 40 stitches. So that means I'm going to do 6 double crochet, chain 40, 6 double crochet. So whatever your total number of stitches is, subtract that by 12, and that's how many chains you'll do in the middle. So we're going to pick up our work and turn it again, and we're going to place our first 6 double crochet. So I've got my 6 double crochet, and now I'm going to chain 40. In this section, it's even more important to make sure that your chains are not too tight. So if you have a habit of chaining too tight, you might want to size up your hook just for these chains. So if my chains were too tight, I would size up to a 6mm and do the chains, and then do the rest with my 5mm. And that's because we're going to be working back into these chains, and if it's too tight, our neckline is going to be tighter on one side than the other. So you're going to loosely do 40 chains. Right, once you have your chains, you do want to make sure you go back and count that this is the correct number, because you're going to need to make sure you have the right number when you work back into them. So even if you think you know how to count, double check it anyway. All right, so once you've confirmed you have the right amount of chains, we're going to move back over, count 6 from the end, and in that 6th stitch, we're going to place our double crochet. And then we're just going to place 5 more double crochet. So that is what our neckline is looking like. So we've got our 6, we've got our chains going across, and our 6 on the other side. And you can stretch it at this point, make sure those chains are not too tight, which is very important. So now we're going to move on to our next row, which is just going to be solid double crochets. We're going to be doing our 6 here, and then we're going to work into every single chain and doing our 6 at the end. But I like to work into my chains a little bit different than you normally would. So turning my work as usual, we'll start with just our 6 normal double crochets. Now when working into the chains, your instinct might be to go into the top like a normal stitch, where you'd go into that or underneath that V shape, but I prefer to work into these back bumps. So when you're looking at your stitch, you have the top of it, which looks like a normal one. Flipping it over, you have those little bumps on the back. So I'm going to be flipping that chain, so that way the bumps are facing towards me, and I'm going to do a double crochet into each bump. So into the first one, we're just picking up that bump and doing our double crochet. And once you've done the first one, it's going to be really easy to do the rest of them because the chain is going to stay facing that way. The reason that I like to do this is because I find it gives a more finished look, because it leaves the stitches looking more finished underneath, same as how it does on the top. So I'm going to do a few more. So I'm going to pick up that bump and just do my double crochet. So after doing a few, you can see here that the bottom of it looks the exact same as the top of a stitch with that little V shape from the 2 loops. So doing this makes it a little bit more finished rather than working into the top where it leaves just the bump and it gives a bit of an unfinished look. So you're just going to continue this across, working into every single chain. And I'm going to meet you back once I finish my chains, just to show you how I do the last one since the chain is turned a little bit. All right, so I've done all of my double crochet except for the last one. The back bump is this little loop here. But for the last one, I prefer to go into 2 loops as I find it a little bit more secure. So I'm just going to yarn over for my double crochet. I'm going to go into that back bump and pick up that second loop, just like a normal stitch, and then finish my double crochet. That does make the last one look slightly different than the rest, but I find it a little bit more secure. And then I'm just going to do my 6 double crochet. And now our neckline is complete. So we've got our front panel and our neckline. Now all you have to do is just repeat this front panel on the back. So you'll turn your work, do your 3 rows of mesh, do your 1 row of double crochet, and repeat that for as many times as you need, the exact same as you did for the front. So I'll be doing 3 repeats like I did on the front, so I'll be doing 12 more rows. 3 mesh, 1 double, 3 mesh, 1 double, 3 mesh, 1 double. Once I finish the back panel, I'll meet you guys back here and show you how I connect it under the armpit, and then we'll start working on the sleeves. All right, my front and back panel is done, and this is what we are looking like. We've got our neck hole here, and the 2 panels are going to connect at the bottom here to create our armholes. So our next step is going to be to connect them, but before we do that, you should definitely try this on and make sure it is fitting comfortably and that this space here comfortably fits around your arms. I always prefer to go on the side of caution and make it slightly bigger just to make sure it's not too small, because I prefer mine to have a little bit more of a loose fit, but if you like yours to be tight, then you can definitely make it smaller. Now we're going to leave this side for now and just move on to this side quickly, and we're going to take our end and tie it onto here to secure it and create the first armhole. So we're just going to grab our darning needle and thread our needle and just create a little knot to secure it. We're not going to be working on the arm right now. I'm just going to get securing this out of the way. So I just go into the corner stitch here and back into the one we came out of, and then through that hole to create the first knot and pull that tight. And then I usually just do a second knot just to make sure it is fully secured. I always prefer to do at least 2 knots just to make sure that nothing has any chance of coming out. So that's secured. We're going to leave that there and return back to our other side. Now you'll see that I do have a stitch marker here. I just prefer to do this when I am doing adjustments on my project to make sure it doesn't come out. I just put it into the loop here, and as you can see when I pull it, my piece doesn't unravel. So that's a good tip for if you need to set down your piece in the middle of a project, or if you need to make any adjustments and don't want it to fall out while you're working on it. So now that we are back onto our side, I'm just going to take my stitch marker out, and we are going to connect the armhole here and start working on the arm. So for this side, because I don't have a loose string to make a knot, I'm just going to make a slip stitch into the corner. So I'm just going to go into the corner here and making sure I'm going under 2 loops just to be secure, and place a simple slip stitch. So that is our armhole, and now we can start working on the actual sleeves. To make the sleeves, we're going to be continuing the same pattern of our double crochet and our mesh rows, but we're going to be working in rounds, where we're going to start on one side, work all the way around, connect it, and build our rounds on top of it. We're going to start by doing a solid double crochet row. To do this, we're going to be working 2 double crochet into each row from here. So our first one is going to be a standing double crochet as normal. When we're working into the sides here, there's no specific place to actually go like a normal stitch, so I just insert into the top of a double crochet, and I try to make sure I'm always going under 2 loops so that it's fully secure. And I'll make my first double crochet, and then I'll just go into the bottom of that row and place my second one. And we're going to do this all the way around. So each row of our front and back panel is going to have 2 double crochet, and I find that helps you place them evenly and get a good amount. So I do one on the top of the double crochet and then one on the bottom there. And again, there's no specific stitch to go into, I just kind of do it by feel, but I try to place these evenly across. So I'm trying to have even spaces throughout it. So we're going to continue doing 2 stitches in every single row here. I'm going to continue this and meet you back once I am done this row. Alright, I have finished my round. You can see I've met back at the beginning here, but it is still open. And you can see there are 2 double crochet for each row as much as possible. Now before I connect this, I do need to count it and make sure that the amount of stitches I have here is a multiple of 3. We don't need to add 1 this time, it just needs to be a multiple of 3. So I'm going to count this and see how many I have. Alright, so I counted mine and I ended up having 52, which is not a multiple of 3. The closest multiple is 51, so I'm just going to take out a couple stitches and put them back in with 1 less. So right now I'm at 52, but I want to be at 51. I'm going to take out the last 3. And then I'm just going to put 2 in this section. The good thing about this stitch is that it is very forgiving, and if some spaces are slightly bigger or slightly smaller, you really can't see it. So now I'm at 51, which is a multiple of 3, because that's 3 times 17, and we can end our round. To connect this round, we're going to do a slip stitch into the top of our first double crochet. Now, if you find it a bit hard to see where this double crochet starts and ends, you can always put a stitch marker there if it helps. So I'm going to go into the top of our double crochet and place a slip stitch. Now to start our next round, I'm going to be placing a standing double crochet in this same stitch. To do that, we can't go back into the exact same stitch because that's the stitch that we just came out of. So I'm going to go just below it. So you can see there's a space there. There's 1 loop. I'm going to go just below that one and place my single crochet and then stack my second one to make my standing double crochet. So this looks a little bit weird at the moment, but as we do the rounds, it looks very normal and you can't really tell. So now we're going to work on doing our mesh rows. So we're just going to chain 2, skip 2, and do our double crochet. And we are just going to repeat that for the entire round until we meet back up at the beginning. And then we're going to end the round in the same way, where we slip stitch to the top of that double crochet and then start our next mesh round. So I'm going to work this around and meet you back just before I slip stitch there. Alright, I'm at the end of my mesh row. You can see that I've got 2 stitches here, and then I've just got my double crochet to connect to. If you do not have the 2 spaces here as you should, it just means that you don't have the right amount of stitches on your previous row. So if you're missing a stitch, you'll need to add another stitch in your previous row. If you have an extra one, you'll need to take one out. I've got 2 here, so I'm going to end my row by chaining 2 to complete this mesh stitch, and then slip stitching to the top of my double crochet. So that is how the end of your row should be looking. We're going to move on and do another mesh round to continue our pattern. So I'm going to go in and do my standing double crochet. And you can see now that we're building it up, it looks a little bit more normal. And we're going to continue on with our mesh pattern, making sure that we are always putting our double crochets on top of the previous ones to continue the mesh stitch. So now all we need to do is just continue this pattern for the length that we want our sleeve to be until we start our increases. For me, I like to have the straight rows reach until about the middle of my forearm, and that's when I'll start doing the increases. So I'll have it reach from my shoulder to around here, and then we'll start increasing out, and we'll be doing 2 full sections of increases. For the straight rows, we're going to continue this pattern of just solid double 3 mesh, solid double 3 mesh for as long as you need. For me, I found the perfect amount is 5 repeats, and that gets it to exactly where I want it to be on my arm. So I'm going to work ahead and do that and create my 5 repeats. I'm not going to show you all of that because it's the exact same as everything that we've already done, a solid double and then 3 mesh. And I'll meet you back after I've finished all 5 of my repeats, and I'll show you where that length is, and then we'll start working on the increases. All right, I have finished off my 5 repeats, which means I have finished the straight part of the sleeve. I'm just going to try it on for you guys so you can see what it's supposed to be looking like and how far it's reaching on my arm right now. All right, so here's what it's looking like on so far. So you can see when my arm is out, it's reaching just about the middle of my forearm there, which is exactly where I wanted it to hit. It fits really good around my arm here. It's perfectly snug, it's not too tight, not too loose, and because it's straight, it already starts to look like it's naturally increasing just because our arms get a bit smaller there anyway. So this is perfect, and we can now start our increases, which is going to get our sleeve to sharply increase like that, and it's going to end kind of closer to our fingertips, middle of the hand-ish. Now again, if you do have longer arms or if your stitches are a bit tighter than mine, you may have needed to do some more sections here, but I do think it's best to continue the straight part until you're around your mid forearm or a bit farther because you don't want these sleeves to be too short. So our increase rows are going to be starting on the mesh stitch, so you want to make sure we're leaving off on a solid double crochet row. To make our increases, the only thing we're going to be increasing is the amount of chains we do in between each mesh stitch. So we're going to start our row with our standing double crochet as normal. And then for the mesh stitch, typically we would chain 2 and skip 2. We're going to start this row by chaining 3. So we'll chain 3, but we're only going to skip 2, and we're going to put our double crochet in the same spot as we normally would. So by doing this, each mesh stitch is going to slowly start increasing, which means the sleeve overall is going to quickly increase and give us that really pretty big bell sleeve. So for this entire round, you're going to chain 3, skip 2, double crochet. And just make sure while you're doing this that all of your double crochets are still lining up with the previous rows. You can continue this round and I'll meet you back after. Alright, so I'm just finishing off this round. I chained 3, so I'm going to slip stitch to the beginning of my round, and that is what our first increase row is looking like. So you can see there's not much of a difference here, but by the second and third rounds of increasing, it's going to significantly change, which is exactly what we want. So for the next round of increasing, we're going to be adding 1 more chain, so we're going to be doing 4 chains in between. So we'll start off with our standing double crochet, and we're going to chain 4, and then we're going to put our double crochet on top of our previous one. And by doing that, we're skipping 3 chains. So we're chaining 4, skipping 3. And you're just going to continue this for the entire round. Chain 4, double crochet on top of the previous one. Coming up to the end of the round, I've got my 4 chains, so I'm just going to slip stitch to the beginning as usual. Now for our next round, we're going to be doing another increase, so we're going to do 5 chains in between each section. So the exact same as the previous rounds, we're doing our standing double crochet. We're going to chain 5, and then we'll place a double crochet on top of our previous one. And continue this for the entire round. I just finished up the round, and this is what we are looking like now. You can see our piece is definitely starting to increase, And our mesh spaces are starting to curve a bit at the top, which is exactly what we want. As we continue the increases, we're going to get a nice ruffly or almost scalloped edge to it. So to continue on our mesh and double crochet pattern, we do need to do a solid row next, but we need to continue on with these increases. So on a normal row, the amount of double crochets we put in there would match the amount of chains, but we need to add 1. So we left off on 5 chains, which means this row we're going to be doing 6 double crochet in each space, plus the ones on top of each one from the previous round. So we'll start off with our standing double crochet. And then in this space, we're going to place 6 double crochet. Now, as you do this, you will notice a bit more that the stitches tend to gather in the middle, even more than they did on the regular rounds. So same as the regular ones, if you don't like this look, you can pause and spread them out, or at the end of your round, go back and space them out properly. But I don't mind the look, so I tend to leave them like that. So I put my 6 there. I'm just going to put my last double crochet on top of the previous one, and that is what the section looks like. When they gather in the middle, I find it tends to make it even more curved, and I personally love that look, so that's why I leave them. So we're going to continue this for the entire round, 6 double crochet in each space, and a double crochet on top of each one from the previous round. I'll meet you back once I finish this one off. Alright, I'm just coming up to the end of the round. I had my 6 double crochet in the space here, so I'm just going to slip stitch to the top of my double crochet. And then we're going to continue on with 3 more rows of mesh stitches with increases. So starting off with our standing double crochet, because our last row had 6 double crochet, we're now going to chain 7 and skip all 6 of those. So we're going to chain 7, and then we're going to place our double crochet right on top of this one. Now you will see while I'm doing this, I'm adjusting the tension in my left hand a lot because it's really easy for the yarn to get too loose with how many chains and all the spaces we're doing. So I tend to adjust it a lot, and I hold it tight in my left hand. And you'll see that when I'm going to put my double crochet in, I'm pulling it with my left hand to keep it tight. So that is what our mesh section is going to look like. Chain 7, skip 6 double crochet, and place our double crochet on top of where we put our other ones. So we're just going to repeat this pattern for the entire round. Just like that. And now you can see our spaces are getting a lot bigger, which is awesome. You'll continue this, and I'll meet you back once this round is done. All right, I finished up that round. So for the next one, we're going to continue on with the pattern. We're going to do a double crochet. We're going to chain 8 and then do a double crochet here. So starting with our standing double crochet, we are then going to chain 8. And then we're going to skip our 7 chains and place our double crochet. Continue this for the entire round, and then I'll meet you for the next one. This row is done, so we're going to move on to our last row of mesh increases. So starting the same as normal, we are then going to chain 9. And then double crochet on top of our previous one. So that is what our mesh section will look like for this round. So continue that for the entire round. Double crochet, chain 9, double crochet. Alright, I finished up the round, which means we're going to move on to our last round of the sleeves, which is going to be a round of solid double crochets. This is still going to be an increased round because we want to end our sleeves very big and very frilly. So we're going to be adding an extra double crochet, same as we did on the previous double crochet round. So we're going to start with our standing double crochet. And because we ended off with 9 chains, we're going to put 10 double crochet in here. So I've got my 10 double crochet, and then I'm placing my normal one on top of the previous one. And that's what the section is going to look like. Now, because this section is quite wide, I do tend to do a little bit of adjustments on this one, especially because it is the last round of our sleeve, so you're going to see it a little bit more. So I like to just space these stitches out just a little bit so they're not as grouped in the middle. It still has a nice big curve because we have an extra stitch in there, so it still looks exactly how we want it to look. So now all you're going to do is continue this pattern for the entire round, placing a double crochet on the post and then 10 in the space. I will meet you back at the end, but we're not going to slip stitch to end it because I'm going to show you a different technique for how to close off the end of our piece. Alright, the last round is done, and as you can see, I did not slip stitch to join it. If we were to fasten off by slip stitching and then snipping our yarn, it does make it a little bit visible because that slip stitch is clearly here, and it's easy to see the difference between that and our regular stitches. So instead what we're going to do is use our darning needle to close this up and make it look as seamless as possible. So I'm just going to take off my stitch marker. So the method to fasten off, we're going to pull up a long loop, and then we're going to snip it at the top. And we're going to pull out our yarn, so we're left with just our long thread there. This is not secured at all here, as you can see. So we're going to grab our darning needle and thread it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to mimic the look of an actual stitch. So this is our last stitch here that you can see. What we're going to do is go into the stitch beside it. So I'm inserting my needle into that second stitch. So our ending stitch is there, and I'm going right into the second stitch, and I'm going to pull my yarn tight. So I just pull it tight like that. Then we're going to go back into the stitch that we came out of. So we're going to go in through the top there and out through the back underneath a second loop. So I just want to make sure you guys can see that. So we have our stitch there. We're going to go in through the top and underneath that second loop there. So we're going through 2 loops. We're going to pull that through and pull it tight. So this, you can see it a bit better, looks like a regular stitch, and we don't have a weird slip stitch hanging out there. Now we need to actually secure this. So what I like to do is I go back into the other stitch, just under a loop, and I'm just going to create a knot right here. We're going to pull that tight, and then I'm going to go around and create a second knot because I always want to make sure I'm very thorough and none of my yarn is going to come loose. So this part isn't particular about where you need to go through. I just pick up a loop from one of the stitches and a loop from the other one, and then I'm going to knot it up. And now this is what it looks like on the front. You can't really tell the difference, and on the top it looks like just a bunch of normal stitches. And now all we need to do is just weave in our end, and you can do this whichever way you prefer. I just go back and forth through a bunch of the stitches a few times until it feels secure enough. I like to go through one side and then back through the same row, and then I tend to just go a bit farther on the other side, and then I go back through where I just came through. Once you've weaved it in a few times and feel like it's secure enough, then you can just snip that end and then pull it to make sure that your yarn has disappeared and that it is secured. And that is how we do our sleeves. So now all you need to do is connect your yarn on the other side and do the same sleeve all over again. Because the sleeve is the exact same on the other side, I'm not going to walk you through how to do that, but I am going to show you how to connect your yarn and where you should be connecting it to hide the seam the best. So going back over to our other side, we want to connect our yarn at the base here. That way the seam is underneath our arm and it's less visible. So we're going to need to connect new yarn here so we can start on our next sleeve. So to add on a new piece of yarn, I do this using the slip stitch method. So I'm just going to start with a regular slip stitch, and then I'm going to connect my yarn at the base here on the right side of that knot that we placed. I'm going to insert my hook into a stitch, making sure I'm going underneath 2 loops, and I'm going to put that slip stitch on my hook, and then I'm going to pull it through like I was yarning over. Then, using my new yarn, making sure you're not using your tail, we're going to chain 1, hold on to that hook, and then we're going to take our tail and tie a knot with it. And then I'm just going to tie a second knot a bit tighter, just to make sure it is, again, fully secured. And then if you want to, you can always take your both ends and tie another knot with that. As you can tell, I tend to tie more knots than I need to, but I would rather have more knots than not enough because I don't want to risk any chance of my piece falling apart. Alright, so now that our new yarn is secured on here, you can go into the next stitch and start making our double crochet row. As I'm doing this, I will be crocheting over my ends to start weaving them in, but once the round is done, I will fully weave them in to make sure they are 100% secured. And now that we've attached our yarn, all you need to do is repeat the steps from the other arm, do all of the rounds that you need for your straight rows, and then do the 2 sections of increases. And then your mesh top will be done. Alright, so at this point you should now have a beautiful top just like this one. Don't forget to weave in any of the loose ends you have left. And the final step for this one is an optional one, but I recommend it. The final step would be to block or steam your project. This just helps loosen up the stitches, make it a little bit more even, and help the flow a bit better. But you don't have to, it's just an optional step. If you guys followed along and made your own version of this, I would love to see it. So if you're posting it anywhere, feel free to tag me because I would love to see what you guys create. All of my information is in the description below. You're also free to sell these pieces as well. Just make sure you credit me as the pattern designer. So if you watched this video all the way through, thank you so much for supporting me and my channel. I appreciate it so much. If you have any problems with this pattern or any questions, feel free to leave a comment and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to my channel for more content as I post new videos at least once a week. Thank you guys for watching and I'll see you next time.